Okay, folks. Hello, welcome to Bards and Books. I am Usman, and I am joined today for another author interview. This is an author whose work I have been reading for the past year and has quickly become one of my favorite series so far. This is W.D. Kilpack III, also goes by Bill. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. I am honored to be here. I'm going to do a little schmoozing here. You are actually my favorite booktuber.
Oh, wow. That means a lot. I appreciate that. Thank you very much. And yeah, your work I think is phenomenal. The new Blood Saga in particular, one of my favorite series. And so I thought, why not introduce more people to this series and your work? So I have you here today. We're gonna talk a bunch about his work, answer some questions, but why don't I give the floor to you for a bit? You can introduce yourself, talk about some of your work, and let the people know who you are.
Well, I've published 6 books so far. That 4 books that are out are the new Blood Saga. Book 1 is Crown Prince. Book 2 is Order of Light. Book 3 is Demon Seed. Book 4 is Relari. Book 5 should be out in the next month, knock on wood. I'm doing the final edits and polishing the cover art. This is Paleface, which is a sci-fi novella. And then this is my most recent release, Battlecom, which is a dystopian military sci-fi. My first 5 books have received 24 book awards, and I don't even know what to say to that. That is just, it's just humbling, and I'm just grateful for that. I was published the first time when I was 9 years old, of all things. Isn't that crazy?
Mm-hmm.
I wrote a poem, and my teacher entered it into a contest without my knowledge, and I won. And they published it in the local newspaper. That was who was sponsoring the contest. And I beat adults to win this contest. But mine was the only one published that they wouldn't publish my age. Mm-hmm. Everyone else, their age was in it, and mine wasn't. And I felt slighted. And so I literally didn't tell anyone until I was 15. And I was applying for a writing job. And so I put it on my resume. And that was the first time I told anybody, because I felt slighted. So I wasn't going to give them any kind of recognition. I guess I was having attitude. But then I did get that writing job when I was 15. And since it was an adult position, they couldn't ask my age. And then I kept turning down, it was for a sports publication. And I kept turning down some of these events that they were telling me to go to. They finally asked me what the problem was, and I told them I don't have a driver's license. And I had a mustache when I was 15. I did not look 15. Yeah. And so they said, oh, well, we still want you to write for us, but you can't be in the position that we gave you. And so good on them that they didn't fire me. And yeah. So I continued freelancing from then on, and had a lot of I stopped counting when I hit 200 publication credits when I was about 20. And then I put my books on hold to raise a family. And when my youngest graduated college, and I was like, well, now it's my time. And I'm focusing on my books, and I'm going at it 100%. And I'm just making the most of it, and I'm just loving every minute of it, making the most of it.
Yeah. So you have been doing this a long time then, writing since you were a kid.
Yeah, a lot of work as a journalist, a lot of news, a lot of, believe it or not, poetry. A lot of that happened after I won another contest while I was in college, but I won an open competition that was for all of North America, and I took third in that, and all of a sudden it went from enter our contest to send us something and we'll publish it. But poetry doesn't pay. And so that was nice, but not real good for raising a family. So news, pays better, but people don't go into journalism to make money. They go into it because they're adrenaline junkies and they like knowing about things first and stuff. And so fairly quickly after having kids, I had to make some adjustments because I couldn't give my kids the kind of lifestyle I wanted them to have, off of that kind of money. I had to sell out and go corporate.
So before your the books you've published, you've had you might have mentioned it already, but you wrote a lot. Like there was a lot of, you wrote poetry, you mentioned, you did journalism. So you've written a lot of work, I guess, that before publishing your books.
Yeah, working in marketing, I would write all the copy. I've worked several places where I wrote maybe 90% of everything that came out of the company. I worked as a technical writer. I worked as a proposal writer, writing marketing copy, doing all the public relations writing. PR is basically, the way I did it is I would write news. And then whatever publication, if they didn't have to edit it, because I'd worked as a editor, then I knew what they wanted. What they want is something that they can plug in and not have to edit or rewrite. And so I would write news rather than PR fluff that was taught in some places. And that was my philosophy. I called it shooting for the bottom rung, which doesn't sound real positive, but that's what I did. I, as an editor, had a file that was all press releases that I didn't have to edit, so that when I had this much space to fill, I had something to plug in, and that's what I did. And so my press releases got placed all the time because of that. And I do that to this day when I'm writing press releases and so on. But I've done a lot of writing. I did some ghost writing. That I'm not a good ghostwriter because I am a writer. It is extremely dissatisfying to have someone else's name on my work. Especially, I wrote a chapter for a book that was a best-selling business book, and it has someone else's name on it. And I signed a contract, so I can't tell you what it is, but it was the last one I ever did.
Yeah.
So because I'm some people, they're okay with that. I'm not.
Yeah.
After that, I was just I can't do it again.
Yeah, I could imagine how that feels. Let's see what we got here. Nicole's Bookish Nook, hello. Good to see you. Jacob, hello. How are you doing?
I think I know who that is. That was one of my wrestlers that I coached.
Ah, nice. Eric, I love the new Blood Saga. Okay, well, you and me both. Yes.
You just made my day.
Okay, so we talked about your work, and then you mentioned you took a hiatus from writing, but when you got back into it, so that's when you decided to buckle down, and is that really like when your publishing journey, I guess, took off and all these books came?
Well, with my book publishing, yes. That when COVID hit, I was still coaching wrestling, and I thought, well, it's a sign, because I couldn't continue coaching in a sport that there's no way to control the spread of the disease. And so I went ahead and I chose Crown Prince as the one to start with. I didn't stop writing, because I have about 30 books that are sitting in the bullpen.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and at various stages of editing, because I write every day without fail. And I've been like that since I was about 6.
Wow.
When I was a kid, I wanted to open my own comic book company, and I would do the pictures and write the stories, and I was going to take down Marvel. That was my goal. If you asked me, I was 6 years old, and I tell you that. And I still have all the comics and stuff like that I did then. I've got a box full of them. But so ever since then, and even before I could write, I would draw my stories. And
Hmm.
so, but with COVID is when I published my first and went through with that. And since I'd worked with a lot of publishers as a freelancer, then with the way that Amazon really changed the whole publishing industry, I just thought, I'm going to do that. I've got a marketing background, and I've had some experiences with publishers where they changed my stories to the point that I was really unhappy with the result, that I just decided this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to go this way. I can control it. I can do the cover art. I can do the story the way I want to do it, and not have somebody saying this is the formula, or whatever they might be doing.
Mm-hmm.
And so I went through and has really been figuring that out as I go. And also, when I was getting my master's degree, I managed the flagship Walden books in Utah. And so I had that end of the spectrum that I had some pretty good knowledge also. So I figured that I had a pretty good background to be able to step in and kind of step into the deep end.
Yeah. Well, from all the awards and how much I've enjoyed reading, you're doing a great job.
Well, thank you.
Mm-hmm. So we've gone through the publishing journey a bit. Oh, about your publishing journey. So what does that look like? What are some things you've learned along the way, I guess?
Well,
probably a lot.
Yeah, don't limit yourself to the instructions that are, if you're publishing through Amazon, don't limit yourself to those instructions. Go out and look elsewhere, because there are much more detailed instructions out there that have a lot of the little quirks. If there are things like certain fonts, if they're in italics, certain letters stick out, and it'll get your document flagged, so it doesn't pass. And you don't get an email notification that it doesn't pass. And so, yeah, exactly. I figured that out the hard way. And so then I've had books go out that were not my finished edition. That's a painful lesson. So things like that happen. So there are little things like that. Go out and search, because the stuff that is published on Amazon is not is not comprehensive. There's a lot of stuff out there that gives you some of those ins and outs. And so look for it and use it, because that would, if I'd have done that, then that would have been very helpful for some of the pain that I went through at the beginning. I would also suggest, don't publish 2 books at the same time. I did that once, and I will never do it again. I thought it would be okay because one was a novella. It was not. I did Demon Seed and Paleface at the same time, just because Paleface is a novella. I thought, sure, that's okay. No, don't do 2 books at the same time. Spread them out. So that's another little tidbit of advice. And
did one of them kind of like get overlooked, or how does that work?
Yeah, Paleface is kind of the overlooked stepchild kind of thing. It didn't get the same attention, and also it was just really hard. Every one of the books I've published has had problems getting it done, and you think that after 6 books that I've got it down. Well, every single one of them has had problems, and they've been different every time. One of them, my file got corrupted, and so that was horrible.
Yeah.
And I had to go back and try to rebuild. I had to go to a backup, and the backup was, unfortunately, was about 6 or 7 weeks old. I've done a lot of work on it since then, and go back and try to rebuild, and that was horrible. But there's, you think you know the beast, and there's always new things. There's always new things that happen. And so go through and take notes when you're going through the first time. If there's a problem, make notes. And then next time you're prepared for it. So I have a log that I keep of things that happened. And that's helpful because now I those things that happen, I make sure that I'm prepared for them. And then there's new things that happen. And so my log grows and it grows and it grows.
Yeah.
But eventually I'll have one that goes just smoothly. I'm not there yet, but so that's one thing I just learned recently is for ebooks. I had just a personal bias because I'm working at the bookstore and I just love books. I love physical books.
Mm-hmm.
I buy a new book and I literally sit there and I'll go and just smell it. That might be weird, but I do that. So I have resisted getting an ebook reader. Well, my wife is amazingly supportive, and she knew that I was being stubborn just for the sake of being stubborn. So she bought me a Kindle, and I gave her a little bit of attitude, and she said, "You have ebooks, you need to be able to look at them." And I was like, so
Yeah.
And the thing is that now, I have friends that are authors and I want to read their books and if they're on Kindle Unlimited, then now I love my Kindle. But I was resisting simply out of stubbornness. Don't do that. All of you people out there, don't do that out of stubbornness. Don't do what I did. You might feel like you're standing your ground and digging, fighting the good fight or whatever, but don't do that. I resisted learning about a bunch of the social media because as a college instructor, if my students were not paying attention in class, it's because they're on social media. I resisted a bunch of that out of stubbornness for that reason. That was a problem in terms of marketing my stuff. I had to learn it on the go, and that was a problem. But I am learning it. It's just I had a little bit of a learning curve to go, and it slowed me down. But that was self-imposed and through stubbornness. But I go through now, and if people ask me for help, I help. If people ask me for advice, I give it, and I try to pay it forward. Anybody who helps me, I try to help them back. For example, when you gave me a great review, then I go out and I post all over the place. Part of that, if I do one of my big weekly pushes, it takes me 2 days to do that, but that's potentially about 5 million eyeballs. And your number of subscribers has gone up quite a bit since that first review, and I hope that I've been a part of that.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
And that's I'll do that for anybody. If I feel like they have made an effort to help me, then I'll get back. And that's just part of the game that I think is that if people help, then they give it back. I have
Absolutely.
people that, I've got other people's books on my website on the shop page because if they've done something, I'm not saying it sets the world on fire, but it's something I can do.
Yeah, no, and it's a great community. Like starting this channel and getting to meet authors and other booktubers and so many people, they are very, very kind and supportive. So
yeah,
it's a wonderful community.
Yeah.
And I know what you mean by the stubbornness because I was dead set on physical books for a very, very long time. But I can't deny how convenient ebooks are sometimes. So convenient.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, if you don't mind, I'd like to get into the new Blood Saga now. This is
absolutely.
If people haven't seen by now, this is one of my favorite series currently. If you've seen some of my previous videos, you've heard me gush all about them. So, speaking on the new Blood Saga, First of all, what inspired this epic fantasy world? I mean, and all these elements, you've got some very extensive world building, some very interesting and like nuanced kind of magic and interesting characters. So what was the inspiration for this series? How did this start?
Um, well, there's three different things that combined to get this started. One, I was having a recurring dream that was hitting me almost every night for months, and I would wake up in tears every time I had it. And since you've read book 4, you know what it is now.
Hmm.
And so whenever I have dreams like that that are either so vivid or they just keep coming and coming and coming, then I have to write them. So in this case, that was one. Another is that while I was in college, one of my undergrad degrees is in philosophy. And I always wanted to have a character that was based at least loosely on Socrates. And Socrates would go into a trance-like state where he called it being seized by the demon of philosophy. And he would literally freeze in place, and he would come out of it with this epiphany. And so Nathar is seized by the demon of sight. And so he can see into the future, he can see into the past. Sometimes he touches something or someone, and sometimes he locks in place and sees the future or the past or so on. And so that's the kernel that's at the very core of his character. And then I draw maps, and I collect them also. I've got a huge filing cabinet full of maps. And so I would always draw my maps by hand, but I was experimenting with doing them on the computer. And I had this new map that I was feeling pretty good about that I did on the computer. And so I had the dream, this idea for a character, and this map. I thought, all right, I can take those three things and I can make this story. And so I started writing. And when I thought I was going to write a book, and then as I got writing, to get the kind of gravitas that I had from that dream, when you dream, it's all there. All the information is there. All of the oomph and the gut twisting stuff that would destroy me in this dream, it's all there. And I realized pretty quickly I couldn't do that in one book, or be this thick. And so then I thought, I'll write a trilogy. And then as I was getting to book 3, I'm like, crap, I'm not even to the dream yet. And then I thought, well, I'll write 6 books. And then I read all my stuff to my wife, and she calls them her bedtime stories. And so then I was in book 6, and she said, this kind of feels like you're rushing. And I said, well, I gotta, this is a 6-book series. And she said, why does it have to be 6? And I said, because I said it's a 6-book series. And she said, then change it. And I said, but I said it's 6 books. And she said, I give you permission to be longer. And I was like, all right, so then it's 8. And then there are things that I knew I was going to flesh out later. Now I'm fleshing them out because, there's stuff that might have been in book 2 I know I was going to flesh out later, and it got fleshed out in book 4 and so on. So I might pull a Tad Williams. Tad Williams has a trilogy that's 4 books. It's book 1 and book 2.
All right.
Book 8 might be part 1 and part 2. But because I took 4 chapters out of Rilari, out of book 4, and put them into book 5 because it was just getting too thick. Mm-hmm. And I have already taken stuff out of book 5 and put it into book 6. But so that's what happened. I just started writing, and it just started going. And so I've already written all 8 books, and it was flowing, and I got to get it down while it's going. And that's what I did. I just wrote them nonstop. And my wife, especially with my wife's got a degree in psych, and she'll tell me that I don't think that character would say it like that. But especially with female characters, then she'll tell me a woman wouldn't say it like that. And so I've had compliments about how my female characters don't sound like they're written by a man. And I take that as a huge compliment. I've told some other writers that, and they're like, that's rude. And I was just like, no, it's not. That's a huge compliment. And that's because of my wife. That she has given me that insight that has been extremely valuable. And I think that if somebody is writing about the other gender and doesn't have feedback like that, I think that they're shooting themselves in the foot.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I've done. And then I've got some pretty meticulous notes about characters and that sort of thing. And since I wrote it all the way through straight, then they were all pretty fresh as I'm going through. And there's some things that I knew I wanted. At the very core level, I wanted it. A lot of times with my world building, I'll choose a culture that is at the very core. You may not know it is, because I've buried it so deep, but at the core of the new Blood Saga is Celtic culture. And I've had one person who asked me if it was, and because there was a few things, and they said I knew it. But at the core is Celtic culture, and then I've got another series that's not published yet that the core culture is Viking, and some others that not all cultures, like Quanese culture has got a blend of two cultures, and Osiriansa is very similar, and they have that same core blend that is a blend of Native American and Mongolian. But I don't know if you'd know that, but again, that's buried in there, but that's kind of the core, and I built from that.
Yeah, no, I've gotten hints of all different kinds of cultures from all the cultures that you portray in there. So
yeah. And there's little, I don't want to make it overt, but there's little things in there that I do a lot of research. And so there's things in there that I want it to be authentic. Even though it's fantasy, I want it to be authentic. And so a lot of stuff that, like you see pirate movies and they have telescopes. Well, they weren't invented yet. I mean, it's cool, but they weren't invented yet. Mm-hmm. And stuff that, with the horrific things you see in book 4, were happening in England while we were expanding into the West and having Indian wars in the United States. That was going on.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I know what you're talking about. Yeah, R'hllari was a lot of gut punches.
Yeah, exactly. And you told me no spoilers, so I'm not spoiling.
Right. Yes. Okay, so that kind of brings me along to the characters, because these are some very, we get really deep with these characters. That's one thing I noticed right off the bat from reading Crown Prince, is how deep we get with these characters, and all the struggles that they're persevering through and all the emotions linked to that. So you might have done this already a bit, but if you could go through what it was, the process for writing these characters, how that unfolded. Some maybe were easier to write than others, or the character work.
Well, I talked about Nathar a little bit already, but at the same time, all this stuff with talking about genres and subgenres and all these things, I don't like labeling anything, and that's part of why. It depends on who the reviewer is and what my stuff even is. Most often they say it's epic fantasy. I've had people say it's dark, medieval, sword and sorcery, and I'm just like, okay, yeah, it's all that. And I call it realistic fantasy. because my characters are real people. They have real issues. They have real lives and jobs, and they do real things, and they make mistakes. And in the beginning, Nathar has a bad knee. How do you do that? Because he was showing off for a girl when he was a teenager.
Mm-hmm.
Because teenagers do things that they are stupid, and he was doing something like that.
Yeah.
And and so my knee ended my wrestling career. I know what that's about. So that was kind of easy for me to write. Stuff with and a lot of people say that a lot of that characters always have some sliver of autobiography in them, and so there is a little bit of something that's autobiographical in all of my characters, a little bit. A little bit with Darshell as being kind of an outcast and not being accepted. I have had a lot of things like that in growing up, and so that was actually one of the easier things for me to write. Those feelings of being outcast, but at the same time gritting my teeth and saying, "I'm not going to let you beat me," which is, I think, is part of her core character. But at the same time, she's broken. But it had nothing to do with that. Something else that was just a horrible thing, which my older sister passed away in an accident, and it's the effect it had on my parents is something. I don't even know how to describe it, but they're not the same. And so Darshell embodies that to a higher degree. And that's one of the things that science fiction and fantasy does, is that they use distortion as genres. They use that exaggeration that makes it easier to see elements of reality, so that you can study the human condition through that use of exaggeration. It makes it easier to see it and study that and study humanity in that way. And so with Darshell, that element of loss is made that much more clear. But then that crack in her psyche, but then at the same time, she has this inner strength. And so some of that was just through personal observation, and that's one thing, is that I am a people watcher all the time. My wife and I'll go to a restaurant, and I'll whisper to her about what people are doing at other tables, and I just watch things and what people do and all this stuff. And I saw a meme once about, careful what you say, it might end up in one of my books or something like that. That's absolutely true. If I see something that I think is interesting or fascinating, Fan X was this weekend. Somebody had a cool name, and I just looked at her and said, "That's going to be in one of my books." And she said, "Awesome." But I just collect these experiences, and because that can add some reality to my characters. And then with Vicari, then he's being around kids and coaching wrestling and all that. I've been around a lot of kids, and there's little bits of all that's in him. And specifically, I've never told him this, so if he's watching, surprise, he is based, at least loosely, on my oldest son. And my oldest son was a scary good wrestler at a very young age. And so Vicari is the same thing as a swordsman.
Yes, yeah.
And that is, so that was very easy to write because it's from reality. People would see my son do things that they just went, whoa, because they'd never seen a kid that age do something like that. So that's where that, that kind of experience, and because it was real, I watched it, I lived it. So a lot of those characters, they come from this experience. They have that element of reality, and that's where it comes from. That all of them have something like that. There's somebody that I know that is that has some kernel in there, or something that some experience that I've had, or along those lines. There's always some piece at the core of them that makes them real. And even if I hate them, I love them.
Yeah. No, I know what you mean. And yeah, you mentioned realism, and I'm glad you did, because that's exactly how I felt reading when I first read Crown Prince. That's one of the things that just kind of shocked me, is how real everything felt, especially the characters, like all the choices and everything about it was so real. And it just, I guess I hadn't read anything like that, so far. So yeah, I think that's something that contributed to my enjoyment a great deal. And you mentioned your wife is a psychology degree. She has a psychology degree, yeah. And and I think on your website too, you mentioned how she helped you kind of ground some things, or adjust some things. And I'm sure we have her to thank for making these books as great as they are. so yeah, you're right, spot on. Okay, let's go to something a little more, I guess, might be easier, hopefully. Your favorite books and authors, and the things that inspired you. What did you grow up reading? What are your favorites?
Well, the first stuff I was reading was comic books, and Marvel, DC. That when I was in third grade is when I discovered Wolverine, and it shook my world. Seeing Wolverine, a superhero who killed people, and I was just like, whoa. And immediately, he was my favorite superhero. The anti-hero character I just really hadn't seen to that degree. I liked Daredevil. He was kind of an anti-hero, but not to that degree. I'd been reading him since first grade, but third grade was when I first saw Wolverine, X-Men 133. And so, because it changed my world, I remember that. But so that's where that started. Wolverine's my favorite. Submariner, Batman, of course, Superman, Green Lantern. A lot of these that DC and Marvel that I really love. And then when I was in fourth grade, then I read The Hobbit. And again, it was just this amazing thing. And about that same time, I had a friend who had a birthday party, and he's in my gifted and talented class. That's what I wrote that poem for. It was for gifted and talented. And went over there, and there weren't very many kids there. And his mom said, "You should ask him to play your new game." And he says, "Mom," and he says, "No, you should ask him. He would want to play with you. I know that some of the others don't, but he would." And I'm like, uh-oh. What are we talking about here? It was Dungeons and Dragons. And AD&D had just come out. But he had the basic and the expert books and a couple of the new advanced books. 1980. And we played. not only had I just read The Hobbit, now I can pretend to live there. And they happened just right, almost at the same time. And again, talk about rocking your world. So I loved both. I didn't read the Lord of the Rings until 6th grade. Just, I don't know why, it just didn't happen. So again, Tolkien, around that time in 3rd grade, I started also reading mythology. And I read every book that was in my elementary school library on mythology. The first book was Bullfinch's Mythology. They had a kids version, and I loved it. And I just started reading them all the way through. There was one shelf. I read every single one of them, and just loved everything about it. And again, Tolkien, D&D, all that just fit right along with it. And I just started going on from there. My aunt and uncle that you may be watching, my Aunt Jan and my Uncle Wayne, they know about this. Hopefully you're there. They told me about, actually that's where it is, because they told me about the Lord of the Rings, and they also had a huge influence on me in music. They exposed me to the Beatles and Beach Boys and stuff like that, and they would do mixtapes before mixtapes were a thing. And then they also had a library that was like one section of my books behind me, and it had all these books that they suggested I read, which included Tolkien and some other things. And I saw that library and I was just in awe, and I was like, okay, I must have a library like that. And so those were huge influences, my aunt and uncle, on both music and telling me books that I should read. And so that's a lot of explanation where I've only named one author, but Piers Anthony was one that had a huge influence. Alan Dean Foster was another one that had a huge influence. Stephen R. Donaldson with the Thomas Covenant series. The idea of having a main character who's a leper. Oh, wow. And a bunch of these also, the ones that are my favorites are ones that I describe as being fathers of realistic fantasy. David Eddings is another one, realistic fantasy. I love Terry Brooks. My senior thesis in high school for AP English was comparing and contrasting Terry Brooks with Tolkien. One of the few books the book that I've read the most times is Eric Van Lustbader's Sunset Warrior. And that's kind of a blend. It's not necessarily fantasy, but they fight with swords, but it's post-apocalyptic. And so it's kind of sci-fi. But Ronan, the main character, has a samurai sword and he fights monsters. So it feels like fantasy, but it's actually mutations of things. But it feels like fantasy. And it has this Japanese cultural thing going on in it. I've read it more times than any other book. But there's only 3 authors that I've read the book so many times that I've actually replaced them. And that is Tolkien, Piers Anthony, and Alan Dean Foster. And because I've just read them so much or loaned them out to friends and stuff like that, that I've actually bought new ones of the same book. I mean, Tad Williams, Robert Jordan. There's just a lot that had a huge influence that I was a voracious reader. And growing up, we didn't have a lot of money, so I didn't have a lot of toys. My toys were a pen and paper. But if I asked for a book, my parents never said no. And so for me to have something that was a new toy, then I'd ask for a book because they never said no. And that was my in, and I got to go out and go into this other world, whatever it might be. And I loved, and I just loved all of it. Robert Adams with the Horse Clans. There wasn't anything that I read that I didn't love, because it had something that took me somewhere. And some of them, Stephen Bruce with the Jarek series, with Hungarian mythology. It's very cool. Anne Rice with the Vampire series. And I got to meet S.M. Sterling at a con 3 years ago, and I geeked out. I didn't know that I could. I've met famous people. I was fine. I'm trying to talk to him, and I'm all of a sudden, I can't talk. And he's looking at me funny, and I just said, I'm sorry, I'm geeking out. And he goes, oh, I did that with Paul Anderson. Take your time. And he waited, and then we talked, and then I asked him, or then he asked me why I was there, and I showed him my bookmarks. I had 2 books at the time, and he went, and he got on his laptop, typed, looked at my bookmark, pulled them up, hit the enter key, and he said, done. Yeah, it was just super cool. S.M. Sterling is another one who had a huge influence. He wrote stuff that was so edgy for the time that all the time when I'd read his stuff, I would go, you can do that? You can write about that?
Mm-hmm.
And with him, I kind of realized that if you're not pushing the envelope, you're probably not being original. And I told him that. And he sat back and looked at me, and he says, wow, I've never thought about it like that. But I think you're right. Which was a super cool moment for me. And
yeah. Well, I'm gonna just mention something. This might be a hot take, but this is just what I've noticed. So I wouldn't say I've read a whole ton. I mean, I just started seriously reading like a couple of years ago. I started off with The Wheel of Time, and the new Blood Saga reminds me a lot of The Wheel of Time. Like a lot of those elements, this is my own opinion, so more refined. I feel like I enjoyed some of the things I may have enjoyed less in The Wheel of Time. I feel like they worked great here. Like you've done a great job with them here. So, it's immersive, but it doesn't feel tedious or anything like that. That's just something I'd mention. I know there are a lot of Wheel of Time fans out there, so hopefully not too upset. But that's my opinion.
Well, I take that as a huge compliment because it's one of my favorite series, and there are some certain things that are in there that are kind of classic tropes that you see repeatedly, and I did try to take some of those and turn them on their ear. Mm-hmm. And there are some things that that you see over and over, and I took it and went, okay, they did this, I'm going to do this. They do this, I'm going to do this. Yeah. And that is exactly the purpose of why I did it. I'm trying to, you expect this, I'm going to go the other direction. And if I'm writing it and I go, whoa, I didn't see that coming, then you as a reader, it's really going to blow you away. I hope. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Correct me if I'm wrong. Anybody who's read my stuff, but I didn't catch. I can't remember the name. But whoever said you love my stuff, correct me if I'm wrong. But if you're still there, if I didn't bore you to death and you're gone, but that's one thing that I try to do. That to try to. I try to make it so that it's not something that Eric, there we go. I just figured out how to pull the chat up on my end. That if it's something that you've seen a lot, then I try to make it something that's fresh and new.
Yeah. Now, second part of this question, I have to ask this because half of my channel is talking about music. So, are you into music? What's your favorite kind of music? Do you have a favorite artist or style or anything like that? Has it inspired you in any way, writing or otherwise?
Yes. I
There's a lot
love
of
music, and that's one of the reasons that's one of the things that attracted me to your channel in the first place, is that you do books and music. And then that you like, okay, for those of you out there, that he likes good music. So if I offend any of you out there, I don't care. He likes good music. So my wife just gave me a look. And so I'm a metalhead, and I like loud, loud thrashing guitars, all that. Um, a lot of the stuff that you have on your channel is a lot of bands. I'm older than you are, so a lot of the bands that you have are bands that I don't know, but I like. So now I know them, and so that to me is awesome. A lot of them, I hear it and I go, oh, they're kind of repackaging this that I do know,
Hmm.
and that's kind of fun. But probably some of my favorite bands are like Shinedown. I love Nickelback. I love Pearl Jam. I love Kiss. I can go and jump back to '70s. I love uh, Ted Nugent. I love uh, Def Leppard. I love Days of the New. I love Southern rock. I mean, probably the best concert I've ever been to was Leonard Skinner. Um, at the same time, I love Celtic music. I love Jethro Tull. I love uh, I love Queen. There's a whole lot of things that out there. I do like a broad spectrum of music, and I've had people ask me more than once if I use music to get into the mode or the mood. And I love I can't believe Guns N' Roses. It's one of my favorite bands. I can't believe I forgot that. Sorry, Axel, if you're watching. Sorry. I just saw them in concerts, one of my bucket list items, and when they just came recently, I got to see them, and I'm just so glad. So I do use music sometimes. Usually I don't need something to get me in the right mode to write, but sometimes I might be sitting there going, I need to do this, but I'm kind of feeling like this one. Well, if maybe I'm feeling a little more sci-fi. Well, if I put on Jethro Tull, that'll usually get me going fantasy. My mom actually calls it music of the ancients, playing the flute and stuff like that. If not, then I can put on Clannad or Enya, and that's more Celtic going, and that can get me going into more of a fantasy mode. But some people have said that they can't focus if I'm playing heavy metal, they can't focus because of it, and it doesn't affect me that way. I guess there was a study when I was in college that they had these mice in a maze, and they timed them to see the musical effect on them and how long they got through the maze to the cheese. And playing classical music, they improved their time, and playing heavy metal, they stopped making it through the maze. And I love that, actually. But that's okay. They just stopped and wanted to enjoy the music, and so they don't need the cheese. I'm going to listen to this. That's how I look at it.
Mm-hmm.
But I love music, and I sing, so that's something. I don't play an instrument. I've tried, but I sing, and whether you want to hear it or not. And so, what's Rob Thomas's lead singer? What's that band?
Matchbox 20.
There we go. I love Matchbox 20.
Absolutely, yeah. Me too.
And there's a couple of those that that I really like, and they come on and I'm singing. Um, Kenny Wayne Shepherd, I really enjoy also. Anyway, there's a lot that it comes on and I'm just singing. It just happens, and
Yeah.
so. But I love music, and it's just a huge part of me that I used when MTV used to play music. MTV used to play music. I don't know if you're old enough to remember that.
It's been a while. I can't remember. I remember watching MTV. I don't know about music.
They used to play music, and MTV used to always be on.
Mhm.
I always had music in the background. MTV was always there, and then they stopped playing music. I was so disappointed. But I always have music going on. I always have it playing somewhere. And it's just, I need my theme music for life. Yeah, so that's always going on somewhere.
Hmm. Well, I just learned today that you're a metalhead, so that's very exciting for me. We're gonna have to chat more. We're gonna have to chat more about music for sure. um, let's see. Okay, so I thought we'd well, close to an hour now. So I have just one more real question here is so I know book 5 is due soon. It's coming out soon for New
Mhm.
Blood. Super excited for that. Um, but what other projects are you working on? What other writing plans do you have for the near future or far?
Well, I'm also working on book 2 for Battle Calm. Uh, it'll be called Battle Calm Omega Message. And originally, Battle Calm is going to be one book. I wrote the original draft in, I think it was 1984. I watched the opening 30 seconds of the Terminator, the original Terminator, turned it off and started writing.
Hmm.
And so then with rewriting it this last time, because I've made revisions many, many times over the years, it was just getting to be so thick. I went, okay, this is going to be a 1,000-page book. And so I broke it down. It's going to be a trilogy. And so I'm working on book 2 for that. And it is actually not that far out. So that Battle Calm, well, let's see if we can get the glare. Whoops, this way. Battle Calm is this one. And that's dystopian military sci-fi. I interviewed some military vets for this because I created a new branch of the military. And I've had some military vets who have read it since it came out who asked me how long I served.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And I haven't. So that is actually one of the cooler compliments I've had.
Mhm.
So I'm working on book 2 for that. I'm doing some screenwriting also. Should I go ahead? Is it okay if I talk about that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Paleface is a novella. It's a sci-fi novella I wrote, and it is in movie development. And it's the story of Hector Whitehorse, who was a Navajo, and he has what I call a interplanetary traffic accident. He is the proof of alien life. The company that Safe Harbor Films is producing the project, and they have a consultant who I'm not sure exactly how to describe it, but more or less is a Navajo medicine man. And when he read it, the first thing he asked me was, "How long did you live on the res?" And so I guess I did pretty good research on there. So I've been working with him on writing the screenplay because I get to write the screenplay. I wrote it for a contest, L. Ron Hubbard's Writers of the Future, which is why it's a novella, but it has a word limit. And, you've read my books, I don't do word limits. The original story was much longer. I had to cut a lot to make it eligible. I've already written the first draft of the screenplay. It's all going back into the movie, and I'm excited for that.
Mhm.
And so that's something I'm working on also, is the script for that. I'm going to wrap up the second draft of the screenplay here soon. And so that is also something I'm working on. And that's actually a limited edition movie poster that you can see over my shoulder right there. And that is just, talk about feeling humbled. I don't even know what to say about that.
Oh, that's got to be exciting. Yeah.
Oh, it's super exciting.
Mhm.
Again, I don't even know what to say about that.
Yeah.
And again, I'm doing a little bit of polish work here and there. I've got to decide on which book to come out next, because I've got about 30 that are sitting there, and 2 a year. That's going to take me 15 years to get them out, and that's too long. So I got to do quicker than that, and I need more hours in the day, and so that's what I got to do with that. So those are some of the things I'm working on. I am going to start looking at seeing about doing some more events. FanX was awesome. That was this past weekend. Met a lot of people and talked to a lot of people, and talked to some of my readers. I love meeting my readers, talking to my readers. Eric, I meant that, Eric, that when you said that you loved my book series and how it made my day, I meant that. And so having people come up and tell me how much they love my book, and when you had your episode about where you named your favorite new authors, and I was one of those too.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sitting here watching that, and I've got my headphones in, and my wife's desk is right next to mine, and so she's not hearing anything. But she was the team mom, so she's seen and heard me coaching wrestling for years. I cheered and scared her to death. And she turned around, what? And she said she hasn't ever seen me do anything like that, except when I'm in the corner of a wrestling mat, because that was just so cool to have you say that I was one of your 2 favorite new authors. And again, it was just I was hoping, but then we started talking about somebody else. I was like, oh, and then you added another one, and I just exploded. And so again, it's just humbling, because I was a fan of your channel before ever making contact, and so because of you have music and books, that's what got my attention. And so being a fan and having you say that was a huge deal, and having these professional reviewers write these amazing things, calling it atmospheric and Shakespearean, and comparing it to Tolkien and Wheel of Time and Game of Thrones, and what do you say to that? And,
Yeah.
crap, I'm getting emotional. So I just appreciate it so much, and having people tell me these things, and meeting these people, and having somebody that they finished Rilari, and they immediately got on Facebook and were messaging me saying, when is it coming out? You can't leave me hanging like that. And which, you know what that means, and stuff. And I love it. This has been my dream since I was 12 years old, when I wrote my first novel, and I get to live my dream. I'm living my dream right now.
Yeah.
I finally get to do that, and I'm just trying to make the most of it. And and if you go to my website, I've had people tell me that it's obvious my website is, that somebody told me this actually today, that my website is obviously a labor of love. And I'm not sure what said that, but it's the hub, it's the communication hub. I have said that it's the communication hub of my dreams. And I just, I just don't know what else to say. Having people send me pictures of them holding my books, they just started doing that. I never thought anybody was going to do that.
Hmm.
When they sign up, I send them the vows of the Knights of Ro. They
Yeah.
started videoing themselves,
Mm.
reciting
Yeah.
them,
Oh, I
and
saw some of
sending them
those.
to me.
Yeah. It's pretty cool. That's pretty.
And I didn't know that people would want to take part,
Hmm.
and it's awesome. This is all the power of the internet and shrinking the world, and
Yeah.
you know, reviewers from all over the world. You're in Canada, you
Hmm.
know. It's just humbling, and I'm so appreciative of the writing community and the readers, and well, it's amazing. It really is.
Yeah. Well, I know. Yeah, I'm being in Canada. Not a whole lot of events up here that I've found, but I know there's like a lot in the States. So I think, is it Worldcon that's next year in Seattle? Something
Um,
huge one.
yeah, that's a big one. There's a big one in San Diego. I do
Yeah.
have some goals. I don't know if I'll make them next year, but I
Mhm.
do have some that are goals.
Yeah. But Seattle's a short drive, so I'm looking forward to that. And that's really awesome. Like, I'm glad you're, you know, all these awards, well deserved. You've got more books coming up. Super excited for that. You got a film in the works. That's amazing, right? So,
And no
yeah,
pressure there.
yeah, and you get to write the screenplay. That's awesome. Um, got some other metalheads here. What's up, Nick?
Yeah.
Hello. So, Bill, those are all the questions I had. Anything else you want to talk about? Just discuss.
Um, Seems like there was something you'd mentioned in one of your videos or something about my magic system. Was that right?
Right.
Am I right? Am I putting words in your mouth?
No, no, no. Your magic system. Yeah, it's super nuanced. I think there is an element of. It's weird putting the word realism with magic, but it's just super interesting. I can't remember exactly what I said in my video, but yeah, I have to go back and see that.
Well,
But yeah, the magic system is
one thing, as
layered.
far as turning things on its ear, you never see the word magic in any of my books. It's
Hmm.
not there.
Yes. Yeah.
But I wanted something. Magic is not like fireworks in my books. It's more subtle. I mean, some big things happen, but it's not, it's not all that.
Hmm.
And so a lot of it is involved in drawing symbols. And where I took that information from, let's try and get no glare. It's called the Celtic Tree Oracle.
Okay.
And that's the book. And that's where these are actually symbols that were used by Druids. And where there's some stuff where they use use the symbols doing hand signals. That's real. Druids did that.
Hmm.
And they would do it using their nose. They would do that using their forearm, and it was a form of sign language. And so that's where I got the information for that, is from the Celtic Tree Oracle. But
Okay.
then I wanted something more. I wanted it to be subtle, but I wanted it to have something in addition to that. I didn't want it to be where you had to have Eye of Newt and that sort of thing, like that end of witchcraft. But I also didn't want it to have the orb of power kind of sorcery, where you have to tap into the orb, that end of things. So you have the symbols that you draw to tap into the powers of creation, for lack of a better word. But it's beyond that, because really where the arcane powers come from is the same place where the demons of chaos come from.
Mhm.
If you really, where the power is by having a friend who does it for you. And if not, then they have found a way to tap into it in some way. And one of the ways I wanted to have a method of sort of an incantation or a method of having some specific actions. And where I found that was in this book. If I could turn it the right direction or not. There we go, Scottish Witchcraft. And that's where I did the research for that. It's not exactly what they do here, but that was the foundation.
Yeah.
And
No, it definitely felt steeped in cultures like that. Yeah.
you know, so that's two things that are at the core of it. The thing, so this is the Celtic Tree Oracle. It's the Owam alphabet, OGHAM. And so that's real. You can find that anywhere. But this is the source that I used. But I call it the Old Tongue.
Yeah.
And so a little bit of the man behind the curtain. I just giving away my secrets. But that's what that is. I didn't make that up. And and this, I've got some layers on top of it, but that's where that came from.
Okay.
And so the magic is there, but it's not called magic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And there's some stuff with sacrifice and things like that that's there. There's some things with with blood, but you'll never hear the word vampire.
I remember the first time I discussed your work in that vein, like talking about the magic. I even hesitated to call it magic. I was like, what do I call this system? What do I call this that he's doing here? Is it mad? I guess
Mm-hmm.
magic in a sense, but yeah, no. So it's very cool to have that explained, and it felt steeped in those cultures too. So that's really cool. Yeah. That's all I have. I think we're over an hour here, but this has been a great chat. Thank you so much, Bill, for joining me and for answering some questions and allowing all our viewers to discover who you are and your work. So thanks for coming on.
It's been a great pleasure. It's been an honor, and like I said, I was a fan of yours. That's how it started, and I've really enjoyed this. Great questions, and that I don't get asked every day. That's for sure.
Yeah. No, this is a blast. If you stop by and watch this in the comments, thank you everybody for watching this. If you're catching this on replay, thank you again. As you can see in the video, the author's website is linked in the description, so you can check that out. All his work is there, all the info you need. So I will wrap things up here. Thank you everybody again, and we will see you next time.